very much, Pranesh. Good evening, viewers. You're watching India Upfront and I am Swati Joshi. Well, get ready to shell out more for essential items. A host of goods and services are all set to become costlier with the new GST rates coming into effect from today. Everyday items like rice, wheat, packaged curd, etc. are costlier now as 5% GST will be levied on them. Not just food items, hospital bills are all set to get expensive, and so is travel, with hotel bills on which GST is going to be levied as well. 12% GST will be charged on solar water heater, hotel accommodation and maps and charts. 18% GST will be applicable on printing, writing, drawing ink, knives with cutting blades, paper knives, pencil sharpeners, LED lamps, drawing and marking out instruments. With the Aam Aadmi feeling the pinch, the opposition raised the issue in Parliament. Rajya Sabha proceedings were adjourned for the day after disruption by Congress MPs over issues of price rise and GST. Now, while the opposition is pointing fingers at the centre for being apathetic to Aam Aadmi to the Aam Aadmi's pain, BJP says the decision is not unilateral, highlighting the fact that GST Council meeting is also attended by finance ministers of the states, including those that are governed by the opposition parties.
सावन के पहले सोमवार पे सरकार ने आज बहुत बड़ी गिफ्ट दी हम सबको। तो एक तरफ तो जो इन्फ्लेशन है इकोनॉमी में वो 7% से लगातार ज्यादा है। रिटेल इन्फ्लेशन, बेरोजगारी की दर 7.8% पर बनी हुई है, रुपया 80 को टच कर रहा है। और इन सब का समाधान मोदी सरकार ने सोचा है कि आटे पर जीएसटी लगाओ 5%। इन सब का समाधान ये है कि शहद पर जीएसटी लगाओ 5%। इन सब का समाधान ये है कि मच्छी पर और मांस पर जीएसटी लगाओ 5%।
सुबह से देख रहे हैं जिस तरह से ऑपोजिशन लोगों को गुमराह करने के लिए एक साजिश कर रहा है। जीएसटी में आपके रिप्रेजेंटेटिव होते हैं, ऑपोजिशन के फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर होते हैं, सारे फाइनेंस मिनिस्टर वहां पर रिप्रेजेंट करते हैं अपने अपने स्टेट्स को, और पूरे चर्चा के बाद उसको डिसीजन लिया जाता है कि अंदर में वो पूरे तौर से सहमति के साथ सहमत रहते हैं। इस डिसीजन में वो चर्चा करते हैं और पास करते हैं, लेकिन बाहर में आके वो राजनीति करते हैं। ऐसा बार बार देखा जा रहा है कि ऑपोजिशन, खासकर कांग्रेस पार्टी और कुछ और ऐसी दल हैं जो लोगों को गुमराह करने की कोशिश करते हैं। जनता जानती है सच्चाई, जनता हकीकत जानती है कि पहले भी वैट लगता था इस पे, और आज कोई नई चीज नहीं हुई है, इसलिए इस तरह के स्टंट उनको ही बैकफायर करेंगे।
Of course, every party is a part of the GST Council, but ultimately the government is the one who is to take the decision, right? Did any party in the thing tell to raise the taxes? Where are the proceedings for that? The government is the one who has to take the thing. Of course, suggestions will be given by each and every party. But this kind of tax terrorism, this kind of surgical strike on the middle class and the poor people is definitely not a welcome move by the government.
Decision taken by the GST Council has endorsement of each and every state. Every state's vote value is the same. Therefore, this decision has been taken in consultation with all Congress-ruled states. Now, if Rahul Gandhi is not aware of the process, maybe he should educate himself. Also, this GST will allow for manufacturers and service providers to claim input credit, which will actually help bring down the prices of the commodities.
So you heard the opposition. The opposition is calling it tax terrorism and an surgical strike on the Aam Aadmi. On the other hand, the BJP says GST Council has representation from all the states, including the opposition states as well. The big question is, anybody thinking about the Aam Aadmi? Let's open this up and go across to our guests. We're joined by Dr. Sanju Verma from the BJP. We have Rajat Sethi, author and economist. Karan Bhasin, also an economist on the panel. Saad Shirwani, Samajwadi Party leader. We also have Syed Faisal Ali from the RJD. Good evening to all of you. Sanju Verma, of course, the first question is to you, given all the reactions that have come in from the opposition and also the fact that the food inflation rose to 7.3% on average from February to April 2020. I'm just citing some data. Cooking gas shot up 15%. Retail prices are also increasing. Was this really necessary at this point of time? The timing of it is being questioned.
You know, Swati, this is a very important issue, and I will just highlight a couple of quick points for the benefit of your audience. First and foremost, the decision to bring a 5% GST on pre-packaged and labeled food products, including labeled atta, labeled paneer, labeled pulses, labeled vegetables, labeled curd. That was taken by the 47th GST Council on the recommendation of the group of ministers. And group of ministers was, represented by 7 states: Karnataka, Bihar, Goa, and Uttar Pradesh. I agree, are BJP or BJP alliance ruled states. Bihar, for instance, JDU and the BJP. But there were 3 states in the group of ministers which are not BJP ruled: Kerala, Rajasthan, and West Bengal. So out of 7 states, there were 3 non-BJP ruled states which gave the go-ahead to bring GST at 5% on pre-packaged and labeled food products. That is point number 1. Point number 2, if we have to, ask the question, was the timing right? One important thing which I need to tell your audience is this, that branded atta, branded food products, be it paneer, branded tea, branded coffee, branded milk, this was always, even till about 1 month, 2 months or 5 months back, the GST rate was either 0% or 5% largely. So what has changed now? All the government is saying is that instead of branded food products in unit containers, pre-packaged and labeled products will attract 5% GST. So it is nothing new. There is a slight tweak in the modality.
Are you saying the slight tweak in the modality is not going to burden the aam aadmi?
May I please finish, Swati?
I'm just asking you a follow-up question. Because you are putting out a lot of data, I'm asking you a follow-up question. Is this modality, is this slight tweak not going to burden the aam aadmi?
Yes, I'm coming to that. The slight tweak will not burden the Aam Aadmi Party, because the reason for tweaking this was to rationalize the tax structure and make corrections in the inverted duty structure, which in simple layback terms means that now people who were earlier not eligible to get input tax credit will be eligible for input tax credit, and actually the net impact of this 5% rise on the end customer, on the end user, Swati, be it you, me or Karan Bhasin, will be virtually nothing. And one very important point I want to make.
Okay.
Because I got this data specifically for your show. There are 1,214 items of mass consumption, and I challenge anybody on this panel to say that I am giving out wrong data. 1186 items, Swati. Out of 1186 items, that is 98% items of mass consumption are taxed at less than 12%. Earlier, the tax rate prior to GST coming into force was 18.9%.
So you are happy with 5% tax on atta flour?
All right.
And the curd.
All right. So let's take that across to our guests also. As far as the group of ministers reference that you gave, Sanju Verma, so just 3 states, 3 non-BJP ruled states, but on top of everything, the vote of the central government has a weightage of 1/3 of the total votes cast. We also have Tehseen Poonawalla now on the broadcast. I want to bring in Syed Faisal Ali. Syed Faisal Ali, the government's argument or Sanju Verma's argument is that this slight tweak is not going to, burden the pockets of the Aam Aadmi. In fact, virtually it will be nothing compared to what has been happening. 1. 2, GST Council has representation from all the states. So why didn't members of the opposition parties oppose it right then and there? Now why is everybody talking to the media and criticizing the government?
Swati, first of all, I would like to say that whenever this government takes any decision, there is a lot of confusion and a lot of hue and cry, because this government imposes decision. There is no consultation process, no participation process. Simply they come up with some decision and they announce it. What they have done this time कि जीना तो हो ही गया है मुश्किल, मरना भी मुश्किल हो गया है. Even the cost of cremation has been increased. So just see how insensitive this government is. If I quote the BJP MP Varun Gandhi, who says that जब राहत देने की बारी आई तो लोगों को आहत किया जा रहा है. It's not Faisal Ali who is saying this, it's Varun Gandhi, the leader of the Bharatiya Janata Party, has said.
The question is, अगर ये गवर्नमेंट कोई भी डिसीजन ले रही है, ठीक है, गवर्नमेंट कोई भी डिसीजन ले रही है, आप कह रहे हैं कि राहत देने की बजाय आहत पहुंचा रही है, ठेस पहुंचा रही है लोगों को, कि काउंसिल मीटिंग में क्या ये मुद्दे उठे थे, क्या उसमें
मैं नहीं कह रहा हूं, वरुण गांधी कह रहे हैं.
नहीं, ठीक है, ऑपोजिशन पार्टी होने के नाते
किया गया था,
ऑपोजिशन पार्टी होने के नाते मेरा सवाल
you know the process, you know the procedure of the GST Council. The 1/3 weightage of the central government vote is there.
I just mentioned that.
Whatever is decided in the council, 1/3 weightage is there with the. Yeah, you mentioned that.
Yes.
So the ball is always in the court of the center, and it is centers which runs. So she cannot say that the state governments were also involved in the decision-making process. It is just an eyewash.
Okay, just an eyewash. So let me bring the economists as well.
This government has no fear.
Okay.
And
why, just an eyewash, the representation
why
you're saying.
Because they don't want.
You're saying the representation as far as the states are concerned is just an eyewash, or उस तरह के opposition का कोई मतलब भी नहीं है. I want to bring in the economists, the experts now into the debate.
Certainly.
Karan Bhasin,
they are bulldozing these decisions.
Okay, bulldozing the decision. Karan Bhasin, of course the economy is recovering from the jolt of the pandemic one. The tourism industry is also only reviving. It has just started. Wouldn't this taxing of the hotels, the increase, impact the tourism industry? One. Is this not going to be counterproductive as far as recovery of the economy is concerned?
Not at all, because I don't know about others, but I worked on the issue of GST for about 1.5 years into 2020. We looked at the overall structure, and I can tell you the structure that was there in GST, despite a lot of efforts by the GST Council, was really difficult for any business, MSME, etc., because of a lot of the exemptions that state governments wanted, in particular for their respective industries in their states. Now, by reducing the number of exemptions, what this decision does is that it ensures that the benefit of input tax credit can be claimed by a larger mass of businesses, which I think is more important for SMEs. If you talk to any MSME manufacturer, he can tell you that the ability to claim input tax credit has a far more positive impact on their day-to-day finances and day-to-day operations rather than being exempt from that category. And as far as burden is concerned, the burden on people will be determined on the basis of whether this is a revenue positive, revenue negative, or a revenue neutral decision by the GST Council. And in this particular case, this is a revenue neutral decision, which means that it levies no additional burden on anyone, be it anyone in the tourism sector, be it anyone in the atta manufacturing sector, or even atta consumer. Since it's a revenue neutral,
just for the Aam Aadmi to understand in the common man's term, you're saying this is revenue neutral, and the hike that we are talking about in terms of percentage will have no impact?
No impact, because the input tax credit that will be claimed by the manufacturer ensures that essentially prices at the retail level remain unchanged. That is the very nature of if you look at the GST taxation structure, why is GST different from the erstwhile structure? Earlier we had excise and VAT, and you could not claim a benefit of excise while adjusting your VAT rates. GST solved that problem.
Okay.
Now when you have exemptions, when you pay a tax on inputs, you don't get any input tax credit on that. So for instance, if I'm claiming any service, any packaging service, and I'm paying any GST on it, I don't get any input if I'm not paying any GST, if the final end consumer is not paying any GST.
Okay.
Now when I bring it at a 5% rate or at a 12% rate and so on and so forth, I get benefit of the tax that I've already paid. It reduces my overall cost,
it's a revenue
and that
neutral decision. Revenue neutral decision is not going to impact either the industries or the Aam Aadmi. Virtually no impact.
Swati, the problem with me is, thank you for having me on the show, the problem with me is I don't study in the WhatsApp university. I'm a practicing entrepreneur and a practicing political analyst, so my studies is based on practicality and reality. So let me explain to you the Modi government's philosophy in one line. GST diamonds is 1.5%, GST on hospital rooms is 5%, GST on rice and curds is 5%, and coconut water is 12%. This explains Modi ji in one line. spare the rich, tax the poor. In a country where India has fallen on the hunger rating, doesn't say me, it's a Times of India report, unless somebody thinks Times of India is WhatsApp University, where India's hunger rating has fallen, there they are putting GST on food. This is Modi government 2.0, where Mr. Modi goes on saying cow is our mother, he should, there GST comes on milk products. That is Mr. Modi in 2 lines. 2 years ago, I was live on Times Now, live, when Mr. Modi was speaking at another TV channel's conference, where Mr. Modi claimed that since his coming to power and getting the GST regime, taxes have been removed on rice, on curd, on all these items, which all he sneaked in correctly. And for years, we've been telling the Modi government that please bring petrol under GST. There they don't want to bring petrol under GST because there the government's making lakhs and lakhs and lakhs, 20 lakh crore plus Mr. Modi's made, building himself a new bungalow and aeroplane. So, in one line for your viewers again,
you're saying the Modi government Modi government at this point of time has adopted the policy of spare the rich and tax the poor. That is your take. Okay, your take is spare the rich, tax the poor. Okay, let me bring in Sanju Verma. Sanju Verma, Nirmala Sitharaman told the press that there was no opposition to the rate increase from any state. Rajasthan Minister Shanti Kumar Dhariwal said that the opposition did oppose the proposed rate hike on various consumer items because they believe it has an inflationary impact. And Mr. Ali says that the opposition's views have been bulldozed.
You know, Swati, first and foremost, I would like to say that, Karan actually explained it very well. So I will repeat for the benefit of your audience. Tomorrow, if you, Swati, or me as a customer, we go to an ordinary kirana shop and we say, Bhaiya, 1 kg moong dal dena ya 2 kg chawal dena, you will be charged 0% GST. But suppose we order rice or wheat or paneer, say online via Big Basket, and it comes pre-packaged with a Big Basket label, then there will be 5% GST. But because Big Basket gets an input tax credit, net, even I will not end up paying anything more to Big Basket than I would be paying to my local Kirana wala. So that is GST explained simply. I will just quickly tell you one thing, Swati, because there's been a lot of allegation about WhatsApp University, this and that.
This is how the demonetization was also explained. Ma'am, this is how the demonetization was also explained.
Swati, can I please take
Yes, Sanju, I'll come back to you. Now, you
have
countered Tehseen Poonawalla. You have countered Tehseen Poonawalla.
You cannot go on and on and on.
I want to bring in other speakers.
On and on.
I want to bring in other speakers as well.
This is the same government.
Taj Sherwani, so who is being taxed? Who is being taxed? If you go to Sanju Verma says, आप local kirana shop में चले जाइए या आप Big Basket से order कर लीजिए, कोई difference नहीं होने वाला है. There is going to be no difference. So who is being taxed? Why have we increased the taxes? ये किसके ऊपर impact हो रहा है? Who is getting impacted?
Swati, I want to make one very quick point.
Sanju Verma, I'll come to you.
In 2019, when the Prime Minister was, let me please speak. In 2019, when the Prime Minister was attempting to get re-elected, he came on various TV shows. He made these tall speeches about how all of these commodities that used to be taxed in the past, now after implementation of GST, are tax-free. And TK agreed there was a big election around the corner, so these type of promises had to be made. Now all of a sudden there's a complete U-turn, as Tehseen had said that he had come earlier and made these tall claims, and now because there are no elections around the corner, nothing is happening, so all of a sudden these things are being taxed, and the poor man is the one who has to pay the burden. Now the government is trying to pass its fiscal deficit burden onto the citizens, which is something that is absolutely wrong. All these commodities which they claimed were taxed earlier were not taxed after GST, and now all of a sudden are being taxed again. What the exact modalities are and what the exact calculations are and what WhatsApp University etc. says, I mean, I'm not going to get into all of that, but there were tall promises that were being made about asset monetization again when the elections were around the corner, none of which has really come to pass. I mean, for example, take someone had mentioned the price of crude and how petrol is being taxed and how lakhs of crores are being made. I mean, when crude was at $30 a barrel, why were reserves not put in place then? I mean, we are a net importer of oil. Why were these decisions not taken at that point of time?
Okay,
you're taxing the common man, you're taxing the poor,
because we've also opened up phone lines,
that,
and you know, we have a lot of calls coming in. Our viewers also want to either ask questions or express their concerns, or share their suggestions and views with us. We have Nagesh joining us from Hyderabad and Bhargav from Bengaluru. I first want to go across to Nagesh. Good evening to you, Nagesh. Go ahead. What do you have to say?
Yeah, good evening, madam. I just wanted to ask, sir, this President Poonawala is political, but he seems to be Congress side person who is just laughing. Right. The thing is very simple, madam. We have come out of the corona, every industry is struggling. And government is also struggling. And it is very common that everything has to comes under the tax benefit. That's it. Tax has to be imposed. It's mandatory if government has to run. Second line is all these products once upon a time was sold in openly. Now this is packed and processed. If you go to US, Singapore, Canada, everywhere, if packed good is that the taxes will be applicable. So it has to be applicable. What's wrong in that?
Okay. You're
Why
saying there's nothing wrong.
For that?
There is nothing wrong with, yes, okay. Thank you very much for sharing your views with us, Mr. Nagesh, a viewer who believes that there's nothing wrong with the tax that has been levied. Let's go across to Bhargav now. Bhargav, go ahead, please. Good evening.
See, I think if the government is going away from subsidy Raj and all, that's a great thing which has happened in the last few years. But taxing essentials, I think is very taxing for the common man. So I think the government should look at it again.
Okay, one viewer feels it's justified. Another viewer, Bhargav, feels that the government should take a relook. Government should rethink on this decision. I want to now bring in Rajat Sethi. We've heard some technical words. We've heard some big words like revenue neutral, input credit, and how the government at this point of time through the taxing also will not be burning holes into the pockets of the Aam Aadmi. What does this really mean for the Aam Aadmi? In simple terms, if you could help our viewers also understand, because you heard both views.
So Swati, let me break it down for your audience. One thing that is good about India is that no matter how much shrill our politics is, our policy making which happens away from the din of politics is done in a very sane environment. You know, this is why structures like the GST Council operate so well. Let me tell you, there was a rationale behind why this Legal Metrology Act of 2009 had certain flaws, and this current GST inclusion on certain items covers that flaw. Certain companies that were trying to sell labeled goods were not paying the 5% GST because there was some confusion as to what is pre-packaging and what is post-packaging. There was confusions, and because of the non-clarity as to what the law of the land said, a lot of these corporations who were trying to sell pre-packaged goods, bundling 10 kg packets into multiple such packages and trying to claim that GST of 5% is not applicable to them. There were certain certain GST tax evasions which were happening using these confusions that were there in the law. What has happened effectively through this is the government of India, along with all these state government representatives, have tried to cover that flaw so that there is no leakage of taxation over there. And let me tell you to Tehseen ji also, what Tehseen was saying that it is taxing the poor and like saving money for the rich is actually the other way around. Packaged goods, packaged cereals, packaged rice are actually bought by the more affluent class, not by the poorer section.
Even the middle class buys it. Even the middle class buys it.
The government through various outlets.
It's not just the affluent class, even the middle class buys it.
Certainly. See, middle class, it's a burden on middle class.
Absolutely.
I understand it's a burden on middle class, plus please understand that the bulk of these brands which were doing correct practices in GST are not going to be burdened because they were anyway levying 5% tax on them. Going on the hospital thing also, which you haven't discussed. This is being branded that hospital beds have become more expensive. But look at the fine print. It says that only those hospital beds which are charging greater than 5,000 rupees a night.
But what is the current rate? How much are the private hospitals charging? How much are the private hospitals charging? We need to look at the current situation as well. Before we get into justifying it, we need to look at how much these private hospitals are charging.
Go and check with the hospitals.
Wouldn't it also discourage people to choose cheaper hotels over quality service?
Don't be so insensitive.
Swati,
Let me come in here.
Okay, before we take
This
more
is
comments,
precisely-
I have viewers continuously calling. Because ultimately it is going to impact the Aam Aadmi. It's very important today to hear what our viewers have to say. We have Amrinder joining us from the national capital itself. Amrinder, good evening to you. Go ahead.
गुड इवनिंग मैडम. मैडम आई कैन स्पीक इन हिंदी?
बिल्कुल आप बोल सकते हैं सर.
हाँ मैडम, देखिए ये गवर्नमेंट जो है मिडिल क्लास आम आदमी को क्रश कर रही है. जहाँ इनको फायदा होता है जीएसटी में, उसमें लगा देते हैं. अगर ये जीएसटी में लगाना चाहते हैं तो फिर जीएसटी पेट्रोलियम प्रोडक्ट भी ले आए ना. ये जहाँ इनको फायदा दिखता है वही करे और हम क्रश हो रहे हैं. एक साइड ये लोअर इनकम को फ्री सब कुछ बांटते हैं, वोट बैंक पॉलिटिक्स. तो हायर को कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता, आम आदमी को फर्क पड़ता है.
मिडिल क्लास की कमर टूट रही है. ठीक है, बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया अमरिंदर जी. वी हैव राजीव joining us from Faridabad. Good evening, Rajiv. Go ahead. What are your views?
Yeah, hi, Swati. My name is Rajiv, calling from Faridabad. So basically, I'm not getting into the technicalities of the GST as such. With the economists on the panel have already explained. My take is very simple, Swati. If the country has to grow, and if a certain impact has to be borne by the citizen of this country, they should not be cribbing about it. In return, the government of India is giving us a lot of facilities in terms of roads, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of the development. So if we have to pay a very minuscule amount to meet these expenses, I don't think there should be any cribbing by anyone on the back.
Okay, all right. You think in wake of the facilities that the government is providing, this what we are paying in terms of taxes or the revision in the GST rate is minuscule. Thank you very much, Rajiv. Now let's go back to our guest, to Sanju Verma. Sanju Verma, Amrinder Singh is saying government को जहाँ पर फायदा होता है वो अपना फायदा कर लेती है, पेट्रोलियम प्रोडक्ट्स को नहीं ला रही है, बाकी मिडिल क्लास की कमर तोड़ रही है. How would you respond?
I think that's a very important question, and with folded hands, very humbly, I will take 30 seconds to say what this government has done, Swati, for the middle class. The basic exemption limit in income tax has been raised from 2.5 to 3 lakhs per annum. Earlier, people who were earning up to 5 lakhs used to pay 10% tax. Now that is 5%. Also, the 80C benefits, basically interest on the home loan that you've taken. Earlier, the tax deduction you used to get was 1.5 lakhs. Now the tax deduction you get, Swati, is 2 lakhs per annum. The home rent allowance, HRA, which you get now, is 50% of your basic pay, which was not the case earlier. And Swati, last year, for government employees, as per 7th Pay Commission, the DNS allowance was hiked from 17% to 28%. और मोदी सरकार के आने के बाद जब आप रेस्टोरेंट में अभी खाने जाते हो, पहले you used to pay 28% indirect service tax. Now that is 5%.
एक 30 seconds हो गए. नहीं, आपने 30 seconds मांगे थे संजू वर्मा. I have viewers also continuously calling. I have to go across to Radhakrishnan, a viewer joining us from Pollachi. Mr. Radhakrishnan, if you can hear me, good evening to you. Go ahead.
Yeah, good evening, madam. What I'm saying is that all these politicians sitting there, let them give the amount of money that leaders have spent in incurring medical expenses abroad. Why they go to abroad? Why don't they save the money for the common man? Now they are talking about the common man. But they go to hospitals in America and London and whatnot.
Okay.
So how the government will give unless we get to collect money from these taxes.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Radhakrishnan. We have Umesh joining us from Mumbai now. Umesh, good evening to you. Go ahead.
Yeah, good evening. See, my thing is that healthcare should be made more affordable. Here you are charging, yet what is the 5,000 rupees a bed? It is just nothing. The common hospitals are charging.
Yes.
So they should make it more affordable. The way the government is going, I think after some time, middle class will have to go and take a ration card also and to get a 5 kg free ration.
Thank you very much, Umesh, for sharing your views with us. I want to go back to our guests. Syed Faisal Ali, this is actually a point I was making earlier. Wouldn't this discourage people, in choosing cheaper hospitals over quality service? Healthcare should be made affordable, says Umesh, our viewer from Mumbai.
Certainly, Swati, certainly healthcare should be more affordable and more comfortable for people and people coming from the remote areas. What is happening? People are coming from remote areas to Delhi, Bombay and other cities because those remote areas lack basic medical facilities. This is the reality of India. And this government in last 8 years has done nothing. They have reduced the health care budget. Secondly, one gentleman was hailing and praising the GST step. I would like to remind that GST has failed on two counts. First, it has widened the rift between the centre and the state government. Secondly, it has failed to correct the rates, the tax rates. So, on these two major counts, the GST has failed.
Okay.
Like all other steps
Karan Bhasin,
government, the GST has also failed.
Right. Swati, hold on. Let me ask a follow-up question to all the three politicians who are opposing the move. Please tell me how many line items are there in GST and how many applicable tax rates are there in GST. You answer these two questions and then you comment on GST. Taxation is a very technical issue. It's a very technical issue. You're making all kinds of statements without having any idea of what the taxation structure is. There are total 9 tax rates at present, and there are total 1900 items with major duty inversion issues.
We know.
And as far as hospital, no, you don't know. You don't know.
We know that.
You're saying what you're saying.
The general public, gentlemen, we know.
Listen to me. No, you don't know. If you know, you
problem is that
you don't know. The problem is you don't know.
You cannot go like this. Yes, we know.
Okay, you are talking about Karan Bhasin. You asked him a question.
Talking about the nuances.
Listen to his counter.
You are talking about the nuances of the tax structure. Come to the basic structure of the taxes. The people of India, where the literacy rate is so, you cannot evade behind, you cannot hide yourself behind the jugglery of figures and data.
How many line items are there in consumption items? How many line items? Tell me how many line items. Give me a number. Give me a number. Give me a number. No. Give me a number. Give me a number. No. Give me a number. It's a very specific issue. How many line items of commodities are there?
Are you debating about?
How many line items are there of commodities? How many? Certainly, क्या आप नंबर बताइए ना कितने line items हैं? कितने हैं? 9 items. How many line items are there? How many line items are there in consumption? How many line items are there in consumption? How many line items are in consumption? How many line items are there in consumption? How many line items are there in consumption? How many line items are there in GST? How many line items are there in GST?
Is it for rich and privileged one, or it is for poor?
Okay. Okay, I want to go across to another viewer. You know, it's very important. It's very important that we get enough time and make our points very clearly, because it's a very important and a technical issue, and the viewer needs to understand every aspect. Prakash is joining us from Hyderabad. Prakash, good evening. Go ahead.
Hi, good evening. You know, I understand the hike of GST. You know, with such a long COVID, impact on economy, and similarly we have this war continuously going on. And my problem is, while you have so much of thing, the opposition parties are absolutely, what you call cruel to, not support the government at this hour. However, a few things, very basic necessities are also being taxed very high. Those can be probably, taken back a little and do a kind of, economic justice to the, middle and lower classes. Like, people who travel on work, they are now taxed about 12% more. Unnecessary things, those are, their lives get a little tougher. So there are a few things like that on food items as well. So just bring down the prices a little on that side.
Just bring down the prices a little. Very balanced and nuanced stand taken by Prakash. There we have Anindya joining us from Kolkata. Anindya, good evening. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I am Anindya calling from Kolkata. I have a question. I had an MSME company. So suppose if I have to bill a certain client, so my mandate is in that month I have to file my GST amount, which I am billing to the client. But the problem is the client at the same time is not liable to pay in that month the GST amount and the bill amount. So if the client is not paying the bill, paying that bill amount in that month, but so he is not liable to pay. But I am liable to pay the GST amount in that month in my GST portal. So the entire responsibility as a vendor is on me, but the client is not liable to pay on that month. So what the government is doing for the MSME companies? So client will pay at the third month of, maybe on the second month or third month of my billing date, and the input he will get, but the entire loss is on me. Then I am liable to pay for my client on that month.
Okay. Very specific question. I think.
Fallacy.
Okay.
So there is no
Sanju
room
Verma
for the
wants to
government
respond.
To ensure the client also pays in that month. But
Okay.
I am paying the GST for my client.
Okay. All right. Stay online, Anindya. Yes, Sanju Verma.
Yeah. I think, Anindya, that's a very important question. I want to tell you that there is a specific provision that the Modi government has introduced. It is called TREDS, T-R-E-D-S, Trade Receivables Discounting System. You know, there is a time lag between the amount of money that you have to receive from your customer, but you already made an expense upfront. So you have money upfront, but it takes time for you to get back the amount that you have spent, get back your profit. So TREDS is a platform. It's an institutional mechanism where you can get the facility of discounting your cash flows, your receivables. So you are actually getting institutional support from the government in terms of financing your future cash receivables so that you do not face any problems in between the time lag of spending and actually getting money from your customer. Please use the TREDS platform. It is exactly meant for people like you.
Okay, that was very informative. Very informative. Specific question answered by Sanju Verma. Now I want to go back to our guest. What I believe Karan Bhasin was emphasizing on while he kept asking those questions to Syed Faisal Ali Tehseen Poonawala is that people don't have an understanding of the basic structure of GST. And there's a lot of fear-mongering that is happening, misinformation that is doing the rounds, and it ends up misleading the people. How do you respond?
Minister said hard work pays more than Harvard, and this is exactly what we're seeing on this debate. I think the Honorable Prime Minister who promised demonetization would be a game changer. We know after that the economy contracted. So I really think we should stay out of WhatsApp and stick to GST, which is the topic of the day. Now, I mean, I can also come here and show off 1,300 goods in GST, 500 services in the broadly in the 4 sectors, the other GST rates are etc. etc. And please, on the broadly 4 structures, on the broadly 4 structures, on the broadly 4 structures, please keep quiet and allow somebody else to speak. Have some respect on the show. There are 9 structures and broadly 4 structures. Swati, if you can
okay, 1 second, please. Let Tehseen Poonawala finish his point.
Swati, I very specifically said 1,300 and 500 in the broadly 4 structures and total 9 structures. I very specifically say, but they will interrupt. Now the entire Swati, I cannot talk. I will keep quiet. When they finish,
go ahead, Tehseen, go ahead.
We don't interrupt when Karan and
go ahead.
Speak. They purposefully do it so the viewers can't hear. Look, the fact is exactly what Karan said. 9 GST rates. That does not make it a simple tax. That makes it an extremely 9 times complicated tax. And I'll explain to you what makes it a 9 times complicated tax. You buy wheat like this, no tax. You buy wheat from big basket, 5% tax. You buy wheat from somewhere else, it will attract some other tax. They have complicated the structure so badly. When the wizard Manmohan Singh ji proposed GST, he proposed 2 tax rates, 2 simple tax rates. Everything comes in 2 structures. By making it 9, which Karan himself says, they've complicated it. Now let me expose their lies one in 2 minutes. The CPI basket inflation, the CPI inflation rate is hovering around 7%. Any price increase is going to lead to increase in prices, but it's going to break your purchasing power lower. The CPI basket has not been updated since 2011, 2012. For example, even today, the CPI basket on wholesale inflation has cow dung on it, but it does not have electric cars. But they are charging electric cars GST. Now the fact of the matter is when you charge electric cars in GST, your inflation is going up. Hotels, the weightage is much lower than the amount of hotels have gone up. It's 0.0094.
Again, you're raising some very technical points and specific points. I want Rajat Sethi to come in.
Who does that?
Okay, Rajat Sethi, Tehseen Poonawala says GST was supposed to streamline and simplify things. The government is complicating things, and this is ultimately going to impact the purchasing power of the Aam Aadmi.
See, this is where I sort of agree with Tehseen. I think what we need to have is essentially 2 to 3 GST rates, one for luxury items, one for the average set of commodities, etc., and 0% which should be for all the essentials which cater specifically to the poorer section of the society. But that convergence takes time. That convergence essentially requires government to take baby steps forward so that there is broader consensus among the states, because you can't trample upon the federal structure that way. I can give you so many examples. Fermented fish, for example, coming out of Manipur was to be brought under GST. Normal fish was not to be brought in. All these states were fighting that canned fish as a commodity be taxed at 3 levels. In certain cases it is 0%, in certain cases, in fermented fish, by the way, is 5%, in processed fish it is 12%. And each of the 3 states were fighting tooth and nail to keep those GST rates as low as possible. So, you know, as simple a commodity like this has 3 tax rates. It's because none of the states were budging down on that.
Okay,
and
you're putting the ball in the state's court, so I think Saad Sherwani should respond. The states were not cooperating.
Yes, and that's how.
And time and again that has been the argument. Saad Sherwani.
See, what states were cooperating or not cooperating, I'm not the best person to comment on that. All I can say is that in times like now, when there's joblessness, there's inflation is at an all-time high, so many jobs were promised at the time of elections, those criteria are not even met in the remotest sense. This is not the time for more confusion, and this is not the time to increase levels of taxation. This is the time to help the common man and help the people who have brought you into power, who have put you in government. That is not what this government is doing. This has not been this government's agenda for a very long time. There are different promises during elections, and there are different promises when elections are not around the corner. So who's cooperating, who's not cooperating is not, I will not be the best person to answer that. I admit that right off the hat. But what I'm saying is that in times like now, the government should be helping the citizens.
Okay, in times like now, when there's unemployment, there's joblessness, there's inflation, I just have a couple of seconds to wrap up the debate. Sanju Verma, last word to you. Can you assure people, reassure people that this revision in rates and hikes, like you've been saying, is going to have no impact on the aadmi, on the middle class?
Swati, I quickly just want to say one thing. You know, there's been a discussion on revenue neutral rate. Revenue neutral rate basically means that the flows to the government, even if it changes the tax rate, will remain the same. I also want to say that when we introduced GST, the entire opposition was taken into confidence, and we had decided revenue neutral rate going forward in the next 5 or 6 years will be 15.5%. Do you know what the revenue neutral rate in India is today? 11.6%. That means on an average, the government is charging far lower than what it had even envisaged way back in July 2017 when GST was introduced. And my answer to Tehsil Poonawala, you keep talking about inflation. Average inflation in last 8 years under the Modi government.
Okay, you know, I have to wrap up. I have to wrap up. The government says GST Council has representation from every state and nobody objected. Everybody was on board. The opposition says that their voices have been bulldozed. But ultimately, I think people will judge when they actually have to go to the local store or order from a big basket or other big players in the market. If they have to shell more money, people will judge on the basis of that. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Saad Sherwani will continue with us for debate number 2. Thank you very much to the rest of our guests.